because as I told you, I'm famous for writing in a book.
Taking notes with Dr. E, pen sharp as a shield. Veteran in the game, all grit, no feel. Book stacked to the ceiling, wisdom on repeat. Bible on the desk, keep the mission concrete.
Welcome back to Taking Notes. If you're new here, my name is Dr. Ellison. I am a proud veteran and I love learning and I'm a lifelong learner. I wasn't always a great learner though. In fact, for a long time, I struggled with focus, retention, applying what I read or heard. But something changed. And today I want to share how I taught myself to truly learn on purpose and with purpose. In the military and during my college and graduate studies, specifically my graduate studies, I realized intelligence alone wasn't enough. I also had a realization that I had just been kind of passed along in our public school system. So, with discipline, faith, strategy, a lot of those things were missing. I quickly felt overwhelmed by information. The professors were giving me like entire books to read within the week. And I was just like, how are people even doing this? I was consuming without retaining. Does any of that sound familiar to you? That's when I turned to scripture and some life-changing books. Today, I want to talk you through the key lessons that help me shift my mindset, build new habits, and actually enjoy learning.
Take note.
I know that I have a lot of books behind me, but I wasn't always such an avid reader. It actually took me quite a few years to get to where I really enjoyed to sit down to learn to read. And part of that had a lot to do with how the learning environment is. And some of you have been very fortunate to have good schools, good teachers, good households where maybe your parents are your educators, but not all of us are that fortunate. And if you haven't had an opportunity to watch my introduction video, I started to tell you all that my journey didn't begin in a boardroom, and have quite a bit of experience in the workforce. My journey actually began when my great grandmother sat me in a formally segregated library. And I know that sounds absolutely crazy when we think about segregation and the civil rights movement, and we're thinking about history, we're thinking about MLK and some of our other civil rights leaders. It sometimes can seem like that is ancient history, but it's not. We are not that far removed from history. And I didn't really understand it at the time when my grandmother sat me in that library and she would take me there on a regular basis. A couple of times a week, they would have events there, and she would just let me roam around that library. I was free pretty much to check out any books that I want. I learned how to use the library, how to reference materials, and I didn't really understand the history of that library, the history of the city and the state that I was in, the history of the education system and how people that look like me and where I came from, that was a not something that was freely afforded to me. And so at my age, I did not even really realize that I had the liberty to be in that library where my great grandmother did not have that liberty to go into that library. Some of my family members, relatives, neighbors, they didn't have the freedom to go in that library. I am first generation of full liberty to be able to go in that library. And my grandmother didn't explain that history, but she did go and sit me there. And now that I'm older and she's gone, she's an ancestor now, I am just fully embracing and so grateful that she sat me in that library. Dr. Caroline Leaf wrote a book, and it is called Think, Learn, and Succeed. That book to me was foundational. The author in that book, and I think I have it right here. Let me see. It is this book right here. Think, Learn, and Succeed. This book was foundational for me. Dr. Caroline Leaf emphasized the power of renewing your mind, not just spiritually, but mentally and intellectually. The biggest takeaway is that your thinking directly influences your learning potential. I began to pray over my mind daily, declare scripture over myself, and I started to believe that I could be a disciplined learner. Faith was not separated from my learning, it actually fueled it. And I love how Dr. Caroline Leaf incorporates faith and science. And I really like that about this book. James Clear wrote a book, and this book is probably on everybody's list, and it is called Atomic Habits. Now, everybody has probably seen this book. This book right here taught me that real change doesn't come from motivation, doesn't just come from motivation alone, it comes from systems. So I set up daily learning routines that only take about 10 to 15 minutes a day. Tiny changes like setting my book on my desk the night before, which would make a huge difference. Setting out my workout out clothes, keeping a planner, keeping sticky notes, things to remind me, putting systems in place so that I could achieve my goals. Small steps, one thing at a time. And I didn't just learn that from Atomic Habits, and I talk about habit stacking, systems, processes, procedures. For those of you that do know, I am a veteran, and so being in the military is also a very structured and a very disciplined lifestyle. At least it was, back in the day. So I learned a lot of that in the military, reading regulations, policy letters, having to know those things in order to lead. But reading Atomic Habits just kind of cemented some of what I was already doing, not really realizing that that preparation was me actually having systems and processes in place. And so I really like how um easy reading it is, how James Clear kind of just laid it out, how the author just laid it out, how tiny changes make huge differences. Instead of, when New Year's Eve comes around, everybody wants to have like these grand resolutions for the year. And then within a few weeks or a few months, it's like, well, what happened to that resolution? So I really like that, it's just those tiny steps. And remember this, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And him saying that changed everything for me. So, people look at me sometimes and they're like, "Oh, Dr. E, you're so disciplined and you've been able to accomplish this, that, and the third," and they may not realize that it is the systems that I have in place. I don't feel like getting up and going to the gym every day, or, I may not feel like sitting down on my regularly scheduled day to plan out my week or my month or planning 90 days in advance. But they don't realize that a lot of what makes me successful is that I do things when I may not necessarily feel like it because I have good systems in place. The next book that really helped me, and I really love this one. This book is called Limitless. Unlock your brain. So, this is Limitless. This is by the author Jim Kwik. And I came across Jim Kwik as I was in my MBA program, and I was really in desperate need to memorize things quickly. So if you know anything about getting an MBA or a business degree, there are a lot of statistics and business things you need to know. There's a lot of reading involved, a lot of understanding what the market is like, and I found myself not only really needing to unlearn some of what I had learned, but needing to unlearn and learn quickly and memorize things. And I came across Jim Kwik on YouTube, and I found out that he was behind some famous actors like Will Smith and others, helping them to memorize their scripts quickly. And I was just fascinated by how he was teaching a lot about the brain. And he pushed me to break past mental labels that I had picked up, that maybe I'm too old for this or I'm not wired that way. And that type of thinking is so false. The brain is trainable. Until we die, we can continue to rewire and retrain our brains. And I applied his techniques. Speed reading, visualization, focus recall. But the biggest change, I started believing that I was and I am a learner. So not only does he give you ways to speed read and, be able to recall information, but he teaches a lot about how we are to treat the only brain that we have. Hydration, proper nutrition. And so I really do like that about Jim Quick and his book Limitless. Now, this next book is a straight up heavy hitter for me, these next two. This one is called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. This one reminded me that not everything matters equally. And so when I was in the military, I just was burning my candle at both ends. I was wearing myself out, burning myself out. And if you know, you know, I am a wife, mother, work, just doing all the things, volunteering, going to church. I was just burning my candle at both ends and having the belief that I could actually multitask, and only to find out that I was trying to read too much, learn too much, and really just ending up mastering nothing. So I cut the noise and I focus on one concept at a time, one thing at a time. And I think, let me see, I highlighted a couple of things in here. One thing about me, note takers, is that I am good for writing in a book. You hear me? I will write in a book. I am really good. And I really like too that the author of this book, he also incorporates faith. And that is a really strong thing for me, as I like to incorporate faith into what I do. And one thing that I took away from this book, and I annotated, that my schedule does not control me. That a person can really only focus on the thing that is essential and important at the time. And it's just so crazy how people talk about multitasking and things like that. And it is, you really can't. You can only be focused on what you're focused on at that time. And I really um like that book. Another one that I have read, I don't know how many times, and this is one of my favorites. It is called Eat That Frog. And this book is by the author Brian Tracy. And this one gave me the courage to tackle hard things first. Whether it was reading a dense article, writing a paper, you basically start your day by eating your frog. That means get the hard thing out of the way first. So if you're one of those kids, that's like saying, if you have a vegetable on your plate that you don't like, eat it first. eat the big thing on your day first, get it done, get it knocked out. And it's called Eat That Frog 21 Great Ways to Stop Procrastinating and Get More Done in Less Time. And this is such a simple and an easy read. And even if you just kind of pick up this book in the middle, like just say, for example, you just open this book toward the end, you can pretty much start anywhere in this book and just take one of these techniques and work to apply it. And I have this book on audiobook and I had to get me a hard copy because, as I told you, I'm famous for writing in a book and I love my local library, you all, but one thing about me is I am going to write in a book because the books that I read, even if they're fictional books, they're references for me because I don't just read for myself. I am reading for other people because these tips that I've learned over several decades, I have taken them and applied them, and now I teach them to others. Another book that I really, really, really like is this book right here. Discipline is Destiny, and it is by the author Ryan Holiday. And this book just drove it home. Without discipline, your potential dies unused. So, as a believer, discipline is one of those spiritual virtues. Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 1 says, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge." So I created some non-negotiable routines. Learning, like I said, even when I don't feel like it, that's where real transformation begins. And I like that he goes and gives historical accounts of just different people throughout history and how those people demonstrated discipline in real time. And so I just really love, like he talked about Winston Churchill and just many different people just throughout history and the character of discipline that they had to have. And I really like that about this particular book. And this author has a new book coming out entitled, I believe the title is Wisdom, and I just can't wait to get it. But here's the truth: you don't need to be the smartest person in the room. And in the book by Jim Kwik that's called Limitless, he doesn't say, "How smart are you?" He says, "How are you smart?" Because we are all smart in our own unique ways. So you don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You need to be the most consistent, the most intentional, the most disciplined. If I, a veteran who once didn't really like reading, can develop a love for learning, a lifelong love for learning, which I always have loved to learn, but I just did not feel that learning was something that was being developed and fostered in me. So I had to find that from within. You can too. And it starts with one decision today: to build a life where learning isn't optional, it's foundational. If this video encouraged or inspired you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who is struggling on their learning journey. If I can sit here and write a whole entire dissertation, if I went from someone who barely could had poor comprehension to someone that has a doctorate's degree today, trust me, you can do it too. You definitely can do it. I would like for you to leave in the comment some of your learning challenges and what you're going to do to transform your mind. Which of these books are you going to read next? These are some heavy hitters. And I would just like to encourage you to stay faithful and remember that you are made for more. And we are always just going to continue to observe the world around us and take note and do better. Stay faithful and keep showing up.
Pages flipping, sound crisp like the snap of a wrist. Battlefield scars, turn to boardroom scripts. Book stacked, wisdom towering over the mist. Notes zinced in the margins, every word's a fist. Smooth grind, pen sharp like a blade in the south. Every line of gospel, words spilling from my mouth. Brand is thick, like the air before a storm. 808's booming, the beast my uniform. Take notes, Bible, every verse a revival. Stack books, survival, from the street to arrival. Battlefield, the boardroom, wisdom my recital. Take notes, Bible, I'm scripting my title. Leather-bound thoughts, stitched tight in the spine. Every step a chapter, I'm redefining the grind. Southern roots deep, my foundation divine. Heavy bass thumping, heartbeat to a line. Smooth as silk threads, but the hustle is rough. Over ears whispers, but my tone is tough. Pages dog-eared, lessons carried through dust. From the ballroom to the mic, it's adapted combust. Ink bleeding through the lines, like veins in a map. Every margin scribbled, every thought a trap. Wisdom layered heavy, like bricks in a stack. Take notes, Bible, ain't no turning back. Like I hit it with